On page 210, it says, "There is no question that women have been systematically denied equal opportunity to explore, develop, and share their musical gifts. Largely absent from philosophical discussions for many centuries, women in the 20th and 21st centuries have made significant contributions." In this presentation, we will go through women in music history, some facts and figures about women within the past 100 years in the world of music, and three common philosophies from some women. So women in music history dates back to the Greek muses, who were patron saints, they're patron goddesses of music and poetry. There were quite a few. You can find those on your handout. Then we have in the 12th and 13th centuries, there were 20 known troubadours that were from the provincial area of France. From 1098 to 1179, we have Hildegard von Bingen. She was a Benedictine nun. She wore many hats and had many different roles within her monastery, but she was also a composer and a musician, and she wrote nearly 80 chants. Then we have Maria Anna Mozart. She was also known as Nannerl. This was Wolfgang's oldest sister. She toured with Wolfgang and was a brilliant pianist. But when she hit 18 years old, which deemed her eligible to marry, her father stopped her musical career completely. She did not marry for another 20 years, but she still needed to focus on domestic responsibilities instead of musical career. She is a composer. They have letters from Wolfgang to her complimenting her compositions, but none of her compositions have survived. Then we have Fanny Mendelssohn Hensel. This is Felix Mendelssohn's sister. She studied piano and received a wonderful music education from her mother. She was not supported in her musical career by her family, but she still composed nonetheless. She composed about 400 works, but few were actually published within her lifetime. Then we have Clara Wieck Schumann. This was the wife of Robert Schumann and the friend of Brahms. She was a concert pianist. They have programs from almost 1,300 of her concerts, but they said that most of her concerts were held in homes without programs. So her concert, she was a very prolific performer. She was a composer. Before she was married, she performed her own compositions. And then once she was married, she and Robert consulted each other on their compositions. After Robert's death, she stopped composing and focused more on performing, teaching, and on editing Robert's works. Then we have Alma Schindler Mahler. Her primary interest was composition. She composed over 100 lieder, but that was all before marrying her husband, Gustav Mahler. Gustav forbade her from composing because he believed that her duty was her domestic responsibilities, but their marriage hit a crisis point where she said no. And so after consulting with his friend Freud, he conceded and actually helped her publish some of her works. Only 14 of those survive. And keep in mind, this is in the 1800s to the mid-1900s, so that wasn't that long ago. And then we have Nadia Boulanger. This is a French composer. She won many awards for her compositions, but she's better known as a teacher. Her list of famous composers and conductors and musicians who were her students is quite impressive. She also conducted the BBC Symphony, the New York Philharmonic, the Philadelphia Orchestra, and she was the first woman to conduct the Boston Symphony Orchestra and the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. So we're going to go over some facts and figures that illustrate that no matter how much progress has been made, there is still a long way to go to reach full parity between men and women in the professional musical world. So all of these facts and figures are roughly within the last century. Women were not allowed to earn a degree in music from Oxford University until 1921. The Berlin Philharmonic did not accept women and on their roster until 1982, and then even then, the first woman that was offered a contract, was kind of in an interim position, and they voted her out immediately the next year. Today, only 15% of their roster is women. At the 2013 BBC Proms, only 5.4% of the composers represented on the programs were women. And I'm sure you know about the BBC Proms. There's like 60 concerts, if not more, and only 5.4 of those concerts had female composers. There has never been a female conductor of the New York Philharmonic. They boast inclusion and making great strides for women. So they do have 42% of their roster is women, but still never has had a female conductor. There's been a lot of research finding gender association with instruments. Stronger, louder, more percussive instruments are deemed as more masculine within our society, and then softer, weaker sounding instruments are deemed more feminine. And in 2013, you can find this on page 214, 3 prominent international male conductors were interviewed, and all 3 of them made statements pretty much saying that women do not belong on the podium in front of a symphony orchestra. And their reasons ranged from childbearing and rearing to lack of strength to stand up to the physical rigors of the job. And you can see who those conductors were on page 214. The book then gave a musical example of Schumann's song cycle that he wrote for his wife Clara as a wedding present. There's a lot of debate on whether it was oppressive and kind of spoke to the subordination of Clara, or if it was romantic. So give that a read. It's pretty interesting. So there's also 3 feminist philosophies in music that began on page 217. The first one is Heide Gürtner Abendroth. She was born in 1941. She proposed a matriarchal aesthetic in contrast to a patriarchal one. So matriarchal societies are not the opposite of patriarchal societies where it's male domination. It's not female domination. It is a society free of domination. They still abide by guidelines and codes, but this is just a free of domination. So women just aren't dominated. They do not dominate men. She bases her matriarchal aesthetic on 9 principles that you can see on page 218. And they range from, matriarchal art is located beyond the fictional, and even matriarchal art is not art. So it's thought-provoking. Here's a quote. She said, "Even today, women must present their works in a society whose whole value system is fundamentally patriarchal. And whole cultural institutions, publishing houses, book markets, fairs, academies, conservatories, university, even the Ministry of Culture are controlled by men." So she challenges readers to reconsider gender roles in music. Then we have Susan McClary, who was born in 1946. Her research focuses on musical construction of gender and sexuality, gendered aspects of traditional music theory, gender and sexuality in a musical narrative, music as a gender discourse and discursive, strategies of women musicians. So an example of gendered aspects of traditional music theory, she gives the example that cadences ending on a strong beat are considered masculine, while those ending on a weak beat are termed feminine. So even within our basic form and analysis theory, all of that, we are indoctrinating male dominance, female subordination. Another example of the gender and sexuality in a musical narrative, she points out that there are some strong female characters, but most generally, women are portrayed as weak, passive, or dutiful, or in contrast, they are sexually charged sirens who uses feminine wiles to ensnare men. So she just believes that the full depth of the woman is not considered in these narratives. Then we have Marcia Citron, who was born in 1945. She explored the role of gender in the musical canon. She was concerned with why white, or mostly white, European males assume a place of honor over works by people of color from elsewhere in the world and from females. And I actually asked my husband, he's a non-musician, and just asked him, name 10 composers, and every single one of them were white European male. So I guess her point stands. She wrote about the sonata aesthetic as a symbol of Western patriarchal values. So she's saying even the sonata form is a form of patriarchal values. She says that the first themes are masculine, energetic, and powerful. The second theme is feminine, subsidiary, tender, and lyrical. And the feminine theme symbolized women's subordination in society, while the principal masculine theme reflected male hegemony. She also found male dominance is found in absolute music as well as in music with text. So again, this was chapter 18, Feminism in Music. Thank you.